Welcome everyone, welcome Chuck Brown to our Tech Talk, Under Attack. Today we are going to dive into Chuck's brain about cybersecurity risks and best practices, and it's Cybersecurity Month, so what better time? Chuck, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Sure, thanks for having me. I'm Chuck Brown, CEO of Infinity here in Savannah. We have been in business in Savannah for 22 years. The business was founded by my brother David and myself. We provide managed IT services to local area businesses, to just make it very simple. We act like your outsourced IT department.
Great.
We do that for only local Savannah businesses.
Okay, perfect. So cybersecurity is a hot button topic, right? And people read the news and see that these big corporations have been hacked and what the damage is there. But let's cycle it back a little bit. Rather than what to do when you've been hacked, let's talk about how we can mitigate that risk in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some signs to indicate that you might be at risk or that you might have been hacked?
In a nutshell, it's anything. The things to watch for are anything that looks unusual. That's very broad. And what we don't want is for people to rush back and see something odd on their computer and just assume that they've been hacked and they need to restore everything. A lot of these indicators are sort of like coming home and finding your screen door slightly ajar. It doesn't mean somebody's broken in, but it means you should be cautious. So things to watch for: pop-ups, toolbars, messages from antivirus software that you know you haven't installed, messages from people on Facebook that you don't know, Facebook friends. We've all seen that where people have hacked Facebook accounts. Software appearing on your machine that you think you didn't install. Again, anything that looks unusual is a little bit of call for concern, just to be aware of what's on there.
So what should we be concerned about? Are there different types of hacking? That was a question. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Sorry. Right.
Okay, so cycling back, let's break it down to a really rudimentary level. What does it mean to be hacked?
Basically, anyone accessing your system without your knowledge or permission. It's really just that simple.
So an intruder.
Yeah, an intruder in your system.
Okay, and are there different types of hacking?
Sure. Your phone can be hacked, your cloud systems can be hacked, your bank account can be hacked, your social media can be hacked, or of course your computer can be hacked.
Right. We've all seen those social media profiles where, your poor grandmother's all of a sudden trying to sell you insurance, or a Nigerian prince is trying to get you to send him.
Absolutely.
Right. So let's focus on something a little bit more relevant to our business viewers, and let's focus about your computer.
Sure.
So what are some signs that your computer may have been hacked?
Okay. Before we talk about the actual signs, let's talk about what it means. So, just like if you come home and your screen door is slightly ajar, it doesn't mean you've been broken into.
Right.
Because you see signs on your computer being hacked doesn't necessarily mean you've been hacked. So, approach these cautiously. Don't panic when you see them, but at least be aware of them. So, some things to look for. Browser toolbars that you didn't install that are now popping up. Pop-ups, messages from antivirus software. That's one that you see a lot. Let's say that you've never installed Norton, and Norton is telling you with a pop-up now that you need to renew your subscription, but you never installed Norton. That's a prime example. Messages from people you don't know on Facebook prompting you for things that you never asked about. Anything that looks unusual on your computer, and of course, and it probably is a fairly good indicator you've been hacked if your computer actually is encrypted, or you get a ransomware notice, or someone gives you personal information that they shouldn't have and starts prompting you for money or payments or information or things like that. These are all certainly things to be, to watch for and to take note of.
Right. And unfortunately, in today's environment, this is so commonplace. I mean, there are just thousands of people that are dedicated to trying to get in anyone's information, certainly in businesses.
Absolutely. I saw a recent statistic, and I don't remember the exact number, but somewhere over 60% of all hacking attempts now, it said, were originating from crime syndicates. I mean, it's big business. There's opportunistic, where they're really just casting a wide net trying to get anyone who will click an email, and then there are very targeted attacks that are specific industries or specific sizes of businesses or things like that.
Mm-hmm. So in today's world, unfortunately, these hacking pirates are just so prevalent in our society, whether it's an individual or a business. But I would think that there are certain business categories that would be at a higher risk.
Sure. You can break this into a couple of broad categories. One are opportunistic, where you have someone, let's say an email, a spam email, simply sends out a spam email to a very wide audience, thousands or hundreds of thousands of email addresses, and they don't really care who clicks on it, be it your grandmother or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And when they do, something will happen. You know, they'll either infect the machine or get more information or whatever. And then you have those that are very targeted. They may be targeting healthcare organizations. They may be targeting very large organizations. We subscribe to a good many publications about current hacks and ransomware and attempts and things like that. And you'll often see, you know, there's a targeted attack against healthcare organizations or Fortune 500 companies or energy contractors or whatever. So there are very targeted things. Risk also depends on the industry. So, for example, if you're a healthcare organization and you fall under HIPAA guidelines and there's a breach, then you have notification requirements. So for you, it's not a matter of just cleaning this up and moving on.
Right.
There's also federal requirements about reporting. If certain things happen, you're supposed to notify the officials, or you're yourself in violation of the law. So there are a lot of factors to consider when you're thinking about how much impact a breach will have on your company.
Right. And I would imagine, you and I were talking earlier about reputation, and even a small business, if they were to be hacked in any kind of way that was visible, whether that be in the media or to their customers, would be really detrimental to the integrity of their brand.
Yeah, and I think that's even more relevant in a community like we live in. I mean,
Certainly.
Savannah's a close community. Everyone knows everybody else's business. And if something happens, you know, today and one of your customers is breached, it's very likely it's going to wind up on the news. And no matter what your involvement with it was, you're going to be dragged through the mud. They're going to be dragged through the mud.
Nobody wants their name in that article.
Yeah, absolutely. And your customers are going to question, can I trust you with my data? So,
Right.
you know, these things happen. They don't necessarily happen because you relax. But if they're public, they can harm your company.
Certainly. And so I get a couple of these, a quarter, where I will have one of our vendors or someone pretending to be a purchaser from a government organization or often from higher ed, saying, hey, we want to purchase these radios or this cable or whatever, congratulations, here's a PO, pay with credit card.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a common one. It's been around for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
There is a similar attack that we've seen a good bit of lately, where someone will purchase a domain name very similar to yours, maybe off by one letter,
Right.
and they will send a request to one of your vendors or customers asking for certain things. And if they're not paying attention, they may say, well, it's from your email address, it must be valid. And this happens a lot.
Right. And that's not one of the wide net hacks. Right?
No, that's very specific.
Much
It
more
requires an investment, even though it's a very small investment, it requires an investment, a setup and things like that. So typically those are after higher dollar value targets.
Got it. So if that happens, how should you handle it? What should you do?
Well, the interesting thing about that is who's actually liable. So if someone buys a domain that is similar to SCDataCom,
Right.
let's say they say SCDataCom,
Mm-hmm.
and they send
Convenient.
and they send it to one of your customers requesting payment, and your customer pays that domain, you haven't actually done anything. There's been no breach. That's a process breakdown. So what that means is that they probably either don't have a good process or they didn't follow their process as to how those things happen.
Right.
So SCDataCom in that case actually has, I'm not a lawyer, I wouldn't give legal advice.
On our next TED Talk, we will have a lawyer
Have a
who
lawyer
specializes in cybercrime.
But this is not a place where you've actually been breached or done wrong.
Right.
This is really between the bad guy and your customer at that point. Now, this may cause reputation issues for you because the first thing that's going to be in the press is SCDataCom was breached, they did this. Well, you actually weren't breached. So that's an interesting
Right.
issue.
And although if, hopefully, knock on wood, that never happens to me or my customers, if that were to happen, I think I would feel slightly culpable, even though I would have no
Right.
blame in that whatsoever, because that relationship opened up that window of
Absolutely.
harm,
Absolutely.
which would be just as detrimental as being in a,
Sure,
in a
of
media
course.
outlet.
And one thing that we haven't talked about that we need to just remind folks is to have a good cyber insurance policy. Be talking to your insurance agent, make sure you're covered, because that if you're that customer that happened to, your cyber insurance policy would probably cover it, depending on the coverage.
Great point.
Most people these days have cyber coverage, but we still find an amazing number of people that don't. They go, well, we think our general insurance covers that.
Probably not.
You need to know, and I think it's like flood insurance. You
Mhm.
just assume if water comes in the building, you're gonna be covered, not unless you have flood insurance.
Right. No, that's a great point. I mean, every business should have a good bail team, right? And
Absolutely.
bank, accountant, insurance, lawyer. We've talked about two of them.
Yes.
Here today. Okay, so what about prevention? How can we get in front of this? What are some of the measures that a business should take to make sure that they don't have these problems?
The best prevention, whether you're a business or a private individual, are good backups. And I can't stress that enough, because what you don't have backed up, you don't value. That's just a simple fact. And that's true whether it's your kids' photos and vacation pictures and they're on a home computer and you think, it's not that critical, but it is. I mean, if you lost that, what would be the impact on you personally or emotionally? Backups are not that expensive. You need to have good backups. You need to verify those backups to make sure that you can restore from them. And there's a lot of factors. If you're a business, go to your IT provider, go to your IT department, go to your managed services provider, talk to them about your backups. What kind of backups do you have? How long does it take to recover from them? How much do they back up? How often are they backing up? And even things like that, we go to prospects sometimes and ask, how often is your data backed up? I don't know, we have backups. Well, a backup once a week means you can afford to lose a week of data.
Right.
A backup once a day means you can afford to lose on average 12 hours or at most 24 hours of data.
Right.
So those are conversations. There's honestly no right and wrong answer. They're conversations, but you need to understand those and make absolutely certain you're verifying those backups. You're doing
Right.
test restores and verifying, because in any case, almost always, if you are breached, the least expensive way to recover is to restore a backup.
Right.
That way you don't involve a lot of extra people, you don't spend a lot of time with data recoveries, you just restore the backup. That being said, the best prevention is vigilance. Change your passwords every now and then, use passwords that aren't
I'm gonna
simple.
get that tattooed on my forehead. Change your password.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, we go by Microsoft best practices.
Right.
And they change, honestly. There was a time when Microsoft will tell you, have a password that's, and this is sarcasm, but have a password that's 300 digits long and don't use any repeating characters, and use special symbols, and on and on and on and on. We tell most people, for home use, for your bank, whatever, have a password that's at least 8 to 10 digits long. Make it some combination of characters that is generally nonsensical but makes some sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
If it's one of the interesting things about passwords is the more complex passwords are definitely better to prevent hacking.
Mm-hmm.
But more complex passwords almost guarantee that you will either reuse the same one so that you can memorize it,
Mm-hmm.
put it on a sticky note, on and on, do all the.
You don't like the sticky note in the unlocked drawer?
No. Tattoo it on the back of your.
There you go. So you see it in the mirror every morning.
Yes,
Right.
that's exactly right. But it has to be something that's complex enough that it can't be guessed. The obvious things, not your pet name, not your kid's name, not your birthday, not the date you were married.
So what do you use?
Honestly, my password is no.
And while we're at it, what's your social security?
What that's on my Facebook page. What I try to use is a passphrase that would make sense to me but no one else. Here's an example. Let's say that you like to golf. You might say something like white tees are favorite, and substitute @ for the A's and throw some capitals in there. That's something easy for you to remember,
Mm-hmm.
but it's nonsensical. It's not a pattern that a hacker would probably come up with.
Right.
So it's relatively easy to remember. The other really, really important thing is not to reuse passwords. And this is probably the other great password sin. So let's say that you are a member of a gardening club and they have a website and they didn't spend much on their website. It's not extremely secure, and you use a password on their website and you think, you know what, if they get hacked, it's no big deal. The problem is if that website gets hacked and they download all the passwords and they have your email address, they then go to the dark web and find other places where your email address occurs, like your bank. And there's a very high chance that you use that same password. So once they have the password they captured from a site that didn't have good security, now they can use that password on a site that has great security, and it's the same password, which leads into another thing that we strongly recommend people use is multi-factor authentication. A lot of people hate it. They don't want to do it. It's an extra step. It's a pain in the butt. It doesn't matter, do it. Every site that you have the opportunity, and all that means, and everybody, you may not be familiar with the term, but you know what it is. It's when you go to your bank and you put your password in and they say they're going to send you a code and you have to type that code in. They send it via SMS or an application on your phone. Because if you use that, even if your password's compromised, unless they have your phone as well, they can't log in.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And it is a pain, but it's much less of a pain than paying off a cyber pirate.
And one of the things that we're finding is a lot of these security standards and protocols are being driven by insurance requirements. So if you go back not that long ago, insurance companies recommended you have MFA. Now there are a lot of insurance companies that if you don't have MFA, they're going to rate you much higher or they won't write insurance at all. So insurance companies are driving better and better security protocols because I think claims are getting higher and higher, and they're trying to protect their investors.
Well, they're getting higher and higher because these instances are getting more and more frequent.
Absolutely.
And do you know, not to put you on the spot, but
I don't.
what percentage of cyber attacks actually recover the data that's being held hostage?
I don't know. Even the statistics, this is one of those strange things. So even the statistics on how often people pay the ransom are hard to get because a lot of people pay the ransom and don't tell anyone.
Right.
They don't report it. And there's legal requirements, especially for some organizations, about reporting where you legally have to report it. But you're also trusting a criminal who has hacked into your system to be ethical enough to return your data. So numbers I have heard thrown around, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily valid, is that 40 to 60% of people who get a ransomware attack pay the ransom, and a little over half of those actually recover the data. But again, those aren't, I don't know, those numbers that I've heard or that I've read, but depending on which study you read, that's wildly different too. So.
Right, but approximately 50% of them actually recover the data. Approximately 50% not only go through the cost of paying the pirate,
right.
But also the cost of trying to mitigate that damage and rebuild their network.
There's that. Excuse me. There are some people also think that if you get ransomware, it's as simple as I just give my credit card. Well, that would be a mistake. I just,
please don't do that.
Yeah, I make a payment, it's over. But some of these people are extremely sophisticated, and you have to go purchase Bitcoin, and you have to use special email addresses and set up all these accounts. So depending on who you're dealing with, it's not a trivial exercise. And it should be mentioned that, again, another one of those statistics is that a very large percentage of ransomware is committed by organized crime. A lot of times they're crime syndicates that are in foreign countries, and this is what they do for a living. It's really big business.
Yeah, I have a friend who's in the FBI and he specializes in cybersecurity, and he was just telling me some horror stories about things that happen, and I was shocked to hear exactly what you said, that these cyber attacks, especially the more sophisticated ones that are going off enterprise, like you said, Fortune 500 businesses, these are not a single guy in his mom's basement. These are thousands of people with a process, methodically casting a wide net, going after these big fish, and it's really quite stunning.
There's a lot that involves social engineering, where they are targeting a company, researching the people in that company. So they will find out things like, go to Facebook, find out where you work, where you live, what your address is, what your spouse's name is, what your kids' names are, and feed that into software that has algorithms for passwords, and they will, it's a very methodical process. There was another one that I had read about the insider workings of a hacking organization, and they actually had tiers. They had tier 1, whose job it was to do research, tier 2, whose job it was to hack in, tier 3, whose job it was, once you were in, to get into the network, research things like, do you have backups? Can we disable the backups so that we can then approach you after you have no backups? And then the ransomware becomes much more real because you have no backups anymore. Right. So some of these attacks are extremely sophisticated.
Right. Yeah. It's wild. So the bottom line here is these people that are perpetuating these attacks, they're not dumb. No. And simply panicking and shutting your computer is not going to mean that they suddenly can't see you. Right. So I would assume that's where working with a trusted partner comes into play.
Absolutely. And security, most security is all about standards. It's all about having a process to make sure things are done methodically. Make sure you're updating your systems when you're supposed to. Make sure that your passwords are what they're supposed to be. And that goes back to having all your trusted partners, your financial trusted partners, your insurance trusted partners, because some of these also, the hack we talked about with domain names really relies on having good financial controls, which is out of our area, but you should have an expert who can help you with that.
Right.
What are your financial controls? What is there in your company that makes sure that if your person in charge of accounting gets a text from the boss saying, I need a gift card for this friend of mine,
right,
that you don't go do that because your protocol says, here's the process we have to follow.
Right, totally. Well, process is one of my most favorite words, because often we see our customers, especially as we deal a lot with medium to enterprise level customers, they're paying a lot for these systems. They are very sophisticated and they're ingrained in their operational processes. They do more than just roll back footage if somebody dings a car in the parking lot, right? But even still, there's no magic wand with surveillance technology, with any technology. Process is so important. It's one of the reasons we offer a preventative maintenance plan that updates firmware, changes passwords, because you can have $1 million security system, and if you don't change that password from admin tech to something just a tad more sophisticated, it's $1 million liability.
Right, absolutely.
Right. So tell me about some of the benefits of working with Infinity or another local IT provider.
We're a big believer in buying local, whether you're an IT provider or what. We try to use local vendors whenever we can for whatever we do, as long as, obviously we all have to be price competitive,
of course.
But local companies keep their dollars local. They send their kids to school here, they contribute to local charities, they buy in local businesses, they eat in local restaurants. So we're big believers in local. The other thing about local is reputation. We have had people who come into Savannah from Atlanta, and they'll send a guy here or two, and they will get a couple of customers, and things don't work out, and they pack their bags and they leave. We can't do that. We're a Savannah company with Savannah roots, and we're going to be in Savannah. So reputation means a lot more to us than if we could just pack up and go someplace else.
Right. We have a lot of the same sentiment. Obviously, we've been here for 10 years. 22 years is quite an impressive number. Congratulations to you and your brother. But Savannah has grown so much, and I really love about the city is that we still have that small town feel, and people know the reputation of the businesses that are here.
Right.
It's very visible in the community, which makes it a liability in the community. If you lose the trust of one, I mean, that's not, even if it stays out of the news, that's not gonna stay with that customer. It's gonna be shared.
Things that wouldn't even raise an eyebrow in Atlanta make the front page in Savannah.
Right.
I mean, we're
for better or for worse.
Yes, for better or for worse. That could be a good thing, bad thing. It was something, when we first started our business, someone who was kind of like a mentor to me in business said that. He said, reputation is everything in Savannah, community is everything in Savannah. He said, if you were in Atlanta and you make a mistake, you can pull up roots, drive 5 miles down the road, no one's heard of you.
Right.
In Savannah, if you make a mistake on Friday, the cocktail parties over the weekend, everyone will know on Monday morning.
There you go.
It's important to keep that reputation.
Right, it is. And cybersecurity is one risk to it that we've talked a lot today about ways you can safeguard that. You can protect your business. You can protect your own good name. I mean, in
Sure.
Siena and I think everywhere that's tied in together. But this has been really informative, and I really appreciate your time. Any closing sentiments for our audience?
I would just caution them to be, like I said, vigilant.
Right.
There's a concept in personal security called situational awareness, and it simply means wherever you go, the grocery store, the mall, wherever, be aware of what's going on around you. And with your computing environment, we would encourage you to do the same thing. If you have an IT provider, if you have a managed services provider, that's what they're there for. That's what we're there for. Sometimes I'm asked by business owners, well, this seems small, should I tell you? And I'm like, absolutely. We would rather deal with it when it's small,
Right.
whether it's a problem or not. So if it's not a problem, our feedback gives you a sense of security, and it conditions you to know what to look for. If it is a problem, we can get it at the very beginning versus when it's promulgated throughout your entire network.
Right.
Like that word, promulgated.
I did, very smart.
Thank you. So we want to know those things.
Mm-hmm.
And we would assume that your IT provider wants to know those things as well, because
Right.
that way they can help you. If they don't know, they can't help you.
Right. Well, when we're dealing with any businesses, any service provider should really be a partner to you, whether it's security or IT.
Absolutely.
As we talked about that bail team before, they should be resources that you're in constant contact with. And in today's world, as these digital threats are just getting more and more pervasive, your IT person is really a great resource that you should feel comfortable calling.
Well, and it's funny you say that. Really, the bail team, everyone on there has become, I think, more important to you than they were in the past.
Correct.
Your insurance broker, for years, more than likely, it was a set it and forget it. You meet with them, they sell you a policy, they come tell you when it's renewal time. With the changing landscape of cybercrime, you need to be evaluating that every year. What's new? How am I covered? Am I covered? Legal, same way. Do you have proper process in place? I'm sorry, not your financial people, your accountant.
Right.
Do I have proper process in place? Do I have proper controls in place? IT, these things change all the time. This should be, your relationship with your IT provider should be a consultative one. They should not be just simply telling you need to do these 5 things. They should be talking to you. What's important about your business? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish in your business? How can we help you get there? And by knowing those things, we can more easily recognize what threats are coming up.
Right.
And in your business as well, the same thing. I mean, it's a changing landscape. It's nothing, very few things in businesses these days are set and forget.
Right, absolutely. And especially with these higher tech systems that need to be, at the very least, updated to get the new features and
Right.
everything like that. At the very worst, you need the newest safeguards and things. In our industry and in the changing landscape of the technology world, sometimes customers misinterpret that as a physical security provider, we also do IT. And we always tell them, no, it's parallel lanes. They're similar, but they're separate. And so if anyone came to me with an IT concern, I would refer them, as they have in the past,
Thank
to
you.
Infinity. Yeah. So if any of our referrals or viewers or anyone like that wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Probably the simplest way is to go to our website, infinityiinc.us, and just fill out a contact request form. There's phone numbers there as well, but whatever's easier is fine, and we'll get right back with you.
That sounds awesome. Well, Infinity's great. I definitely encourage anyone that has any further questions to reach out to them directly. We would love to hear what you thought of today's session, any further questions that you have, or any input for future Tech Talks. We are here to serve, and we want to hear your voice. So thank you so much to our viewers. Thank you to Chuck and the Infinity team. It was a pleasure.
Great, thanks for having us.
Of course.